The Late Show with Stephen Colbert's studio crackled with tension, the air heavy with the scent of hot lights and nervous anticipation. It was October 15th, 2024, and the political divide outside seeped into the crowd of graying boomers and wary tourists, their whispers buzzing like static. Rep. Jasmine Crockett, Texas firebrand, sat across from Stephen, her emerald blazer sharp against the stage's black gloss. At 43, she was used to tough rooms, but tonight's audience, split between cheers and skeptical stares, felt like a gauntlet. Stephen, 60, leaned in, his grin masking unease. Jasmine, that clapback at Marjorie Taylor Greene, bleach blonde bad-built butch body, it's legendary. T-shirts, memes, the works. What was going through your head? Jasmine's laugh cut through the hum. Stephen, I was done with distractions. We're debating policy, and she's critiquing my eyelashes? I gave her a mirror, not a fight. The crowd roared, but a few older faces stiffened. A silver-haired woman in the aisle clutched her purse, her husband muttering. Before Stephen could pivot, a shout erupted. That's just divisive noise. A man in his late 50s, flannel stretched tight, stood in the third row, glaring. Why not focus on real problems, like my wife's insulin bills? The studio froze. Stephen's smile faltered, his eyes flicking to the panicked stage manager. Jasmine didn't blink. She turned to the man, her voice calm but piercing. Sir, what's hitting you hardest, those meds? I'm listening. He hesitated, still standing. Insulin's killing us. Costs more than rent some months. Jasmine nodded, unfazed by the cameras. My mom's got health struggles too. I'm pushing for $35 insulin caps, but when folks like Green derail us with stunts, it slows that work down. That's why I speak up, to clear the path for you. The man sat, arms loosening. The woman in the aisle frowned but leaned forward. Stephen, sensing the shift, jumped in. That's real talk. But Jasmine, you're out there for Harris Walls. How do you reach folks like him, fed up with the shouting? We stop shouting past each other, she said, her voice steady. It's about healthcare, jobs, a future where nobody's left behind. I'm not here for applause. I'm here so his wife doesn't choose between meds and groceries. Applause swelled, but tension lingered. Stephen glanced at the clock, commercial break looming. Before we go, any chance you and Marjorie grab coffee? He winked, fishing for levity. Jasmine smirked. I'm ready, Stephen. She knows my number. The band blared, cutting to break. Backstage, producers scrambled, debating the outburst's fallout. Jasmine sipped water, her pulse steady. That man's anger wasn't new. She'd faced it in town halls, on X, in her own family. But he'd listened. So had the room. As Stephen approached, loosening his tie, he said, That was wild. Ready for round two. She set her bottle down, eyes sharp. Let's keep it raw. They're awake now, let's not waste it. The crew signaled the break's end. Outside, New York's horns blared, a city and nation wrestling in the dark. Inside, under those unforgiving lights, something fragile sparked, a chance, maybe, to bridge the unbridgeable. The studio lights snapped back on, bathing the Late Show set in a harsh glow that made every bead of sweat visible. The audience, a patchwork of retirees in windbreakers and locals clutching overpriced sodas, shifted in their seats, their earlier murmurs now a low, electric hum. The commercial break hadn't dulled the edge left by the flannel-clad man's outburst, or Jasmine Crockett's unflinching response. Stephen Colbert, tie straightened but eyes wary, settled behind his desk, glancing at Jasmine, who sat poised, her hands folded, her emerald blazer catching the light like armor. The air smelled of ozone and anticipation, the kind that precedes a storm. Welcome back, folks. Stephen's voice was bright, but his grin carried a hitch. We're here with Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who's clearly not afraid to mix it up, whether it's in Congress or apparently right here in New York. The crowd chuckled, but it was uneven. Some clapping heartily while others, like the silver-haired woman in the aisle, sat rigid, her purse still a shield. Jasmine offered a small smile, her eyes scanning the room. She'd felt the shift during the break, the crew's hushed debates, Stephen's quick check-in. The audience's sidelong glances. The man in flannel, whose name she'd overheard as Tom, sat quieter now, his wife's hand on his wrist. But the woman in the aisle, her face etched with distrust, hadn't softened. Jasmine knew this dance. Every word she said tonight would be weighed, dissected, maybe weaponized. She'd walked that tightrope her whole career, too bold for some, too restrained for others. Tonight, she'd walk it again. Stephen leaned forward, his notes crinkling under his fingers. Jasmine, before the break, you got real about insulin costs, about cutting through the noise in D.C. But let's talk bigger picture. You're a national co-chair for the Harris Walls campaign, out there rallying voters. What's the one thing you wish people like our friend Tom here, he gestured toward the flannel man who stiffened, could agree on, no matter their politics? It was a softball, a chance to pivot to unity and sound bites. But Jasmine didn't take the bait. She leaned in, her voice low but clear, like she was speaking to Tom alone. I wish we could agree that people's pain isn't a game. Not your wife's insulin, not my neighbor's kid who can't afford college, not the folks in my district working 2 jobs to eat. We're not chess pieces for politicians to move around. We're people. And we deserve leaders who see that. The applause came fast, but it wasn't universal. Tom nodded faintly, his jaw tight, while the silver-haired woman, Eleanor, Jasmine caught from a stagehand's whisper, scoffed audibly, loud enough to draw eyes. Stephen, ever the pro, kept his smile, but his fingers tapped the desk, a tell of unease. That's powerful, he said, pivoting. But let's dig into that. You're out there fighting, but Congress, man, it's a mess sometimes. How do you stay hopeful when it feels like nothing gets done? Jasmine's laugh was sharp, cutting through the room's Hope's not a feeling, Stephen, it's a choice. I see it in my district. Teachers stretching their paychecks, parents praying their kids come home safe, folks showing up to vote even when they're tired. They don't quit, so neither do I. But hope doesn't mean ignoring the mess, it means naming it. Like when colleagues waste time on stunts instead of votes, that'd help Tom's wife. Tom's head snapped up, his eyes locking on hers. The crowd murmured, sensing the thread tying the room together, or threatening to snap it. Eleanor, the silver-haired woman, couldn't hold back. She stood, her voice sharp but trembling, cutting through the applause. That's all fine, but why does it always turn personal? You talk about stunts, but that green thing, you made it personal too. How's that helping? The studio went pin-drop silent. Stephen froze, his hand hovering over his mug. The stage manager, visible in Jasmine's peripheral, mouthed something frantic into her headset. A camera swiveled toward Eleanor, catching her flushed cheeks and steely eyes. Jasmine didn't flinch, but her pulse quickened. She'd faced hecklers before, but this wasn't a rally. This was live TV, with millions watching, and a room full of strangers waiting to see if she'd swing or fold. She turned to Eleanor, her posture open, her voice steady as stone. Ma'am, I hear the frustration. You're right, it got personal. But when someone comes at me or anyone with disrespect instead of ideas, it's not just about me. It's about every woman who's been told to sit down, every person who's been dismissed. I didn't answer to hurt, I answered to say, we're here and we matter. Can I ask, what's got you feeling like it's too personal? Eleanor blinked, caught off guard, her purse slipping to her elbow. I just think politics used to be civil. Now it's all insults, all show. My husband and I, she gestured to the man beside her, who looked mortified. We watch the news, and it's exhausting. Nothing changes. Jasmine nodded, her eyes holding Eleanor's. I feel that exhaustion too. My parents, they're in their 70s, say the same. But civility doesn't mean silence when things are wrong. It means talking, like this, even when it's hard. What's one thing you wish would change? The question hung in the air, raw and unguarded. Eleanor hesitated, then sat, her voice softer. I want my grandkids to have a chance. Schools, jobs, a future that's not so. Angry. Stephen seized the moment, his voice cutting in. That's a universal hope, right? Jasmine, how do you answer that? What's the plan for those grandkids? But before Jasmine could respond, Tom stood again, his voice rough but not hostile. "Hold on. I gotta say something. You talk about fighting for insulin for schools, but how do we trust it's not just talk? I've heard promises before. What makes you different?" The crowd gasped, a collective inhale that sucked the air from the room. Stephen's eyes widened, but he stayed silent, sensing the moment's weight. Jasmine's fingers brushed the armrest, grounding herself. The lights burned hotter, the faint hum of cameras louder in her ears. She could play it safe, toss out a polished line about her record. But Tom's eyes, tired, searching, like her father's when he'd lost faith in the system, demanded more. "I'm different because I've lived it," she said, her voice quiet but unshakable. "I grew up watching my mom stretch every dollar, knowing one hospital bill could sink us. I'm in Congress not for a title, but because I know what's at stake. Tom, I can't promise miracles, but I promise I'm fighting for your wife's meds like they're my mom's. What's one thing you need to see to trust again?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Tom didn't answer, but he didn't look away either. Eleanor's husband whispered something, and she nodded faintly, her face less guarded. The audience leaned forward, caught in the rawness of it all, two strangers, a congresswoman, a host, and a room full of witnesses, all teetering on the edge of something real. Stephen broke the silence, his voice softer than usual. "Wow, I think we're all feeling that. Jasmine, Tom, Eleanor, thank you for this. Let's keep it going after the break." The band kicked in, brassy and loud, but it couldn't drown out the buzz. As the lights dimmed, Jasmine exhaled, her hands steady but her mind racing. She'd wanted to reach people tonight, but this was a tightrope over a canyon, and she was still walking. Backstage, Stephen caught her eye, his expression a mix of awe and nerves. "You're rewriting my show, you know that?" She smirked, but her voice was firm. "Good. They need to hear it." The crew hustled, resetting for the next segment. Outside, the city's pulse thrummed, sirens, laughter, a world spinning on. Inside, the audience waited, their silence louder than any applause, hungry for what came next. The Late Show studio pulsed with a restless energy as the lights flared back on, casting stark shadows across the polished stage. The air was thick with the metallic tang of electronics and the faint, lingering bitterness of cooling coffee from the crew's table. The audience, a mix of silver-haired retirees, middle-aged couples, and a few wide-eyed tourists, sat on edge, their earlier chatter replaced by a taut silence. The exchange before the break, Jasmine Crockett's unflinching dialogue with Tom, the flannel-clad heckler, and Eleanor, the purse-clutching skeptic, had left the room raw, like a wound exposed to air. It was October 15th, 2024, and the nation's fractures felt mirrored in this studio, where every word carried the weight of a divided country. Stephen Colbert, his tie now slightly askew, flashed a practiced smile, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. At 60, he'd navigated countless interviews, but this one was a live wire, sparking unpredictably. Jasmine sat across from him, her emerald blazer crisp, her posture calm but alert, like a boxer between rounds. At 43, she was no stranger to high-stakes moments, but tonight's intensity on live TV, with an audience split between allies and skeptics, tested even her steel. The faint hum of cameras and the occasional cough from the crowd filled the silence as Stephen cleared his throat. "We're back with Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who's turning this into, well, let's call it a town hall with jokes," Stephen said, his voice light but careful. The audience chuckled, but it was a nervous sound, like the rattle of leaves before storm. "Jasmine, you just had a moment with Tom and Eleanor, real people, real concerns. Tom, you asked what makes her different. She threw it back at you. Want to take a swing?" Tom, in his late 50s, his flannel shirt creased from sitting, shifted in his seat. His wife, Linda, squeezed his hand, her eyes darting between him and Jasmine. The camera caught his weathered face, etched with years of worry, factory layoffs, medical bills, a life where promises always seemed to break. He cleared his throat, his voice gruff but less hostile. Look, I appreciate you answering, Congresswoman. But trust. It's hard. Politicians say they'll fight, but my wife's still rationing insulin. I need to see action, bills passed, prices down. Not just words. The crowd murmured, a mix of agreement and unease. Eleanor, the silver-haired woman in the aisle, nodded faintly, her purse now resting on her lap. Her earlier scowl softened, but not gone. Jasmine leaned forward, her eyes locking on Tom's. I hear you, Tom. And you're right, words aren't enough. Last month, I co-sponsored a bill to cap insulin at $35 across the board, no exceptions. It stuck in committee because some folks, on both sides, prioritize drug company donations over people. I'm naming names in those meetings, pushing votes. But I need you to know, it's slow and it's ugly. What's one thing you'd want to see to know we're moving? Tom blinked, caught off guard by the question's directness. I want proof it's not just talk. Like, show me the vote, the names of who's blocking it. Let us see the fight. Jasmine nodded, her voice steady. Fair. I'll post a roll call on X, every senator, every rep, who's for it, who's against. You'll see it by tomorrow night. The crowd gasped, a ripple of surprise. Stephen's eyebrows shot up, his pen pausing mid-scribble. Posting votes publicly wasn't new, but calling out colleagues live, with millions watching? That was a gauntlet thrown. Before Stephen could steer back, Eleanor stood again, her voice sharper but less accusatory. That's a start, but what about the rest of it? You talk about fighting, but all I see is chaos, protests, hearings turning into circuses. My grandkids watch this on their phones, and they think that's how adults solve problems. How do you fix that? The studio went still, the weight of her words settling like dust. Stephen's smile faltered, his fingers drumming the desk. The stage manager, off stage, gestured frantically, mouthing "wrap it up" to a producer. Jasmine didn't look away from Eleanor. The lights burned hotter, the faint buzz of a loose bulb humming in her ears. She could deflect, pivot to a safe talking point about bipartisanship. But Eleanor's eyes, piercing, tired, like her mother's when she'd lament the world's coarsening, demanded truth. Eleanor, you're right, it's a mess, Jasmine said, her voice low but clear. And your grandkids deserve better. I don't have a magic wand, but I start where I stand. When I called out my colleague's stunt, it wasn't to score points, it was to say, this isn't how we fix things. I talked to Republicans, Democrats, anyone who'll listen, about bills that matter, schools, jobs, healthcare. But fixing the chaos? That starts with us listening, not just shouting. What's one thing your grandkids need to see to believe in better? Eleanor hesitated, her hands smoothing her skirt. They need to see grown-ups working together. Not fighting on TV, not trending on whatever app they're on. Real results, a school that's safe, a job they can live on. Jasmine nodded, her face softening. I'm with you. I'm pushing for a bipartisan bill on school safety, cameras, counselors, not just cops. It's not sexy, but it's real. I'll keep you posted on X too, deal? A faint smile broke through Eleanor's reserve, and she sat, her husband whispering something that made her nod. Stephen, sensing the room's pulse, jumped in. Okay, Jasmine, you're making promises live on air, bold move. But let's talk about the bigger fight. You're out there for Harris Walls, facing voters who are, frankly, exhausted. How do you convince them this election matters when they're tuning out? Jasmine leaned back, her fingers brushing the armrest, grounding herself. The studio's air felt heavier now, thick with the scent of anticipation and the faint whiff of someone's peppermint gum. It matters because apathy's what the chaos feeds on, she said, her voice rising slightly. Every time someone tunes out, the folks blocking insulin caps, school funds, fair wages, they win. I'm asking voters to show up, not for a party, but for their own lives. Tom, Eleanor, their families, they're why I'm still in this. The applause swelled, louder now, but not unanimous. A man in the back, his baseball cap pulled low, shook his head, muttering to his neighbor. Tom sat still, his wife's hand tight in his. Eleanor's face was unreadable, but her purse lay forgotten on the floor. Stephen glanced at the clock. 2 minutes to wrap. He needed to land this, but the room felt like a powder keg, ready to spark again. Then, from the fifth row, a new voice, younger, female, trembling with nerves. "Congresswoman, I'm a teacher. My kids can't afford lunch, and I'm buying supplies out of pocket. You talk about fighting, but what do I tell my students when nothing changes?" The camera swiveled, catching a woman in her 30s, her glasses fogging slightly, her hands clenched. Jasmine's breath caught. The teacher's voice echoed her own memories, her mother, a single parent, skipping meals to buy schoolbooks. She leaned forward, her voice soft but urgent. "What's your name?" "Sarah," the woman said, almost a whisper. "Sarah, you're a hero, and those kids are lucky to have you. I'm fighting for a federal lunch program. No kid goes hungry, period. And teacher pay? I'm co-sponsoring a bill to raise it, tied to cost of living. It's not passed yet, but I'm naming who's stalling it. Same as with Tom's insulin. Tell your students, change is slow, but we don't quit. What's one thing they need to keep going?" Sarah paused, her voice steadier. "Hope. They need to know someone's listening." Jasmine smiled, her eyes bright. "They've got me, and I'm listening to you." The crowd erupted, the sound swelling like a wave. Stephen clapped, his grin genuine now. Jasmine Crockett, folks, making promises and taking names. "We're out of time, but I'm pretty sure we're all coming back tomorrow to see what happens next." The band blared, brassy and triumphant, as the lights dimmed. Jasmine waved, her smile warm but her mind racing. She'd bared herself tonight, on live TV, no less, promising transparency, accountability, a fight most thought unwinnable. Tom, Eleanor, Sarah, they weren't just faces now, they were her why. Backstage, Stephen caught her as the crew bustled. "You just turned my show into a movement," he said, half laughing, half awed. "What's next?" Jasmine's eyes gleamed. "I'm posting those votes. And I'm calling every rep who's stalling." They're about to hear from Texas. Outside, New York's neon buzzed, its streets alive with the chaos of a city that never slept. Inside, the audience filed out, their faces a mix of awe, doubt, and something new, curiosity. Tom held Linda's hand, his silence heavy with thought. Eleanor tucked her phone away, a draft tweet unsent. Sarah lingered, scribbling Jasmine's X handle on a napkin. The studio emptied, but the air still crackled, a promise unspoken, but alive. This wasn't over. The Late Show studio felt smaller as the final segment loomed, its air dense with the lingering heat of spotlights and the sharp scent of polished wood and nervous sweat. The audience, a patchwork of graying retirees, weary parents, and a few starstruck stragglers, leaned forward, their silence louder than any applause. It was October 15th, 2024, and the raw exchange between Rep. Jasmine Crockett, Stephen Colbert, and 3 audience members, Tom, Eleanor, and Sarah, had turned the stage into a crucible, forging something fragile but undeniable. The nation's pulse, fractured and angry, beat here tonight, and every eye felt it. Jasmine sat steady, her emerald blazer a beacon under the lights, her hands clasped but her gaze alive, darting between the faces in the crowd. At 43, she'd faced tougher rooms, hostile hearings, ex-pylons, the weight of a district demanding hope against odds. But this was different. Live TV, millions watching, and a studio crackling with the unspoken. Tom's insolent fight, Eleanor's plea for civility, Sarah's cry for her students. Stephen, 60, his tie loose now, leaned on his desk, his usual polish giving way to something raw. He'd meant to host a show. Instead, he was refereeing a reckoning. "Welcome back," Stephen said, his voice softer, almost reverent. "We're wrapping up with Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who's turned this into, I don't know, a conversation America needs." "Jasmine," Tom asked for proof. "Eleanor wants a better example for her grandkids. Sarah's fighting for her students. You've made promises, big ones. Let's close this out. What happens tomorrow?" Jasmine exhaled, the faint hum of cameras grounding her. The studio's air carried a trace of Eleanor's rosewater perfume, mixing with the metallic tang of machinery. She could end with a soundbite, a polished vow to keep fighting. But Tom's tired eyes, Eleanor's guarded nod, Sarah's trembling hands, they deserved more. So did the millions beyond this room, watching through screens in diners, living rooms, late-night bars. Tomorrow, she began, her voice low but steady, I'm back in D.C., pulling that insulin bill out of committee limbo. I promised Tom the roll call, who's for it, who's against. It'll be on X by 8 p.m., and I'm tagging every rep stalling it. Eleanor, you want civility? I'm meeting 2 Republicans for lunch, not friends, but we're talking school safety, like I promised. No cameras, no stunts. Sarah, your students? I'm calling the education chair tonight about that lunch program. It's not done till it's law, but I'm not stopping. The crowd stirred, a ripple of gasps and nods. Tom's wife, Linda, dabbed her eyes, her hand tight in his. Eleanor's lips parted, her purse forgotten on the floor. Sarah clutched her napkin. Jasmine's X handle scrawled in shaky ink. Stephen's pen stilled, his grin gone, replaced by something like awe. You're not messing around, he said, half laughing. But let's get personal. This is heavy stuff. How do you carry it? What keeps you going? Jasmine paused, her fingers brushing the armrest. The lights felt softer now, or maybe she'd just stopped noticing their burn. She thought of her mother, counting coins for groceries. Her father, praying late-night shifts wouldn't break him. She thought of Dallas, her district's heartbeat, barbershops debating policy, churches feeding the hungry, kids dreaming bigger than their zip code. My people, she said, her voice catching but clear. They don't quit, so I don't. Every time I want to give up, I see someone like Sarah buying pencils for her kids, or Tom fighting for Linda's meds. They're my why, and they're why I believe we can do better, not perfect, but better. The applause came slow, then surged, filling the room like a tide. But it wasn't unanimous. The man in the baseball cap from earlier shook his head, whispering to his seatmate. A younger couple in the back hesitated, their claps polite but unsure. Tom clapped once, then stopped, his face unreadable. Eleanor joined in, her hand steady, her eyes locked on Jasmine. Sarah clapped hardest, tears streaking her glasses. Stephen raised a hand, quieting the room. Jasmine, I think you've given us all something to chew on. But before we go, one last thing. He leaned in, his voice dropping. You've talked to Tom, Eleanor, Sarah, real people, right here. If you could say one thing to everyone watching, what is it? The question landed heavy, the studio's hum fading to nothing. Jasmine looked past the lights, past the cameras, imagining the unseen, truckers at rest stops, nurses on break, grandparents rocking babies to sleep. Don't look away, she said, her voice a quiet command. This mess, politics, prices, pain, it's real, and it's ours to fix. Talk to your neighbor, vote, hold us accountable. I'm fighting, but I need you with me. One step, together, that's how it starts. The room erupted, the sound less a cheer than a release, like air escaping a too tight, not Stephen stood, clapping, his eyes bright. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, everybody. The band roared in, horns blaring, as the cameras panned wide, catching Jasmine's wave, Tom's slow nod, Eleanor's faint smile, Sarah's trembling grin. The lights dimmed, the show ended, but the air still thrummed, alive with something unfinished. Backstage, chaos reigned, producers shouting about viral clips, crew dismantling the set, Stephen loosening his tie. He caught Jasmine at the craft table, where she sipped water, her blazer off, her face tired but calm. You broke my show, he said, grinning. And I mean that in the best way. She laughed, soft but real. Good. Maybe it needed breaking. He hesitated, then added, You meant it, didn't you? All of it. Her eyes met his, unflinching. Every word. As she left, the studio's buzz faded behind her. Outside, New York glittered, taxis honking, neon flickering, a city restless and raw. Jasmine's phone lit up, text from her team, a missed call from her mom, X notifications exploding. She opened the app, typing fast, "Insulin votes tomorrow. Here's who to watch. Let's do this." She hit send, then slipped the phone away, her heels clicking on the pavement. Across the city, Tom and Linda sat in their hotel, TV off, his hand on hers. He didn't speak, but he opened his phone, searching her X handle. Eleanor, in a diner nearby, sipped tea, her husband quiet. She pulled out her notebook, jotting a question for her grandkids' teacher about that safety bill. Sarah, on a late train, hugged her bag, the napkin tucked inside, her mind on her students. She'd tell them tomorrow. Someone's listening. The night stretched on, vast and uncertain. No laws had passed, no divides had closed. But in that studio, under those unforgiving lights, a spark had caught, small, fragile, stubborn. Jasmine walked on, the city's pulse matching her own, knowing one step wasn't enough, but it was a start.